Hey guys! So, the last video you learned or listened to or watched the quadratic formula song. Now we're going to apply the quadratic formula to an equation and solve for x. Alright, so real quick to review, standard form of a quadratic is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Alright, so now let's look at example 1. So we have x squared minus 7 equals 4x, and we want to get our quadratic to where it's equal to 0. So in order to do that, I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides, and I want to keep my quadratic on the left in standard form. So we get x squared minus 4x minus 7 equals 0. Now, remember, this is where we have a, b, and c. My a is always in front of the x squared term, my b is always in front of the x, and then my c is just the constant. So if you need to on the side, you can write what a is equal to, what b is equal to, and what c is equal to. So if you look at my quadratic, well, a is equal to 1, b is equal to -4, and c is equal to -7. Sometimes just writing this part out will help you fill in your a, b, and c in your quadratic formula. Alright, so I'm going to write out my quadratic formula real quick. So it's x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And now we're going to take what my a, b, and c are equal to and plug it in to wherever there's an a, wherever there's b, and wherever there's a c in my quadratic formula. So x is equal to, the opposite of b goes first. Well, my b is -4. The opposite of -4 is +4. Then we have plus or minus the square root of b squared. Well, b squared is -4, so we have -4 squared minus 4 times my a is 1, times my c, and my c is -7. Now all of this is over 2 times my a, which my a is 1 again. So now we're going to simplify under the radical. So we have 4 plus or minus, well, -4 squared is going to give me 16 minus 4 times -7 times 1 is going to give me -28. And this is all over 2 times a, which is just 2. I am going to rewrite it down here, my next step. So we still have 4 plus or minus the square root of, well, remember when we have a negative minus a negative, make it a super plus so they become positive. So I have 16 plus 28, which is going to give me 44, and that's all over 2. All right, we need to simplify this radical now. So we just learned how to do that. Remember, we drew it on the side. I'm going to draw a little side note. I have radical 44. Well, I can break that down into 2 factors, where one of my factors is a perfect square. Radical 4 times radical 11. Well, the 4 is a perfect square, which becomes 2 radical 11 because I can't break that down anymore. So I'm going to change that radical 44 to my equivalent radical, so it's going to be 4 plus or minus 2 radical 11 all over 2. All right, so now we have this plus or minus in between. We have to split that up. So we end up splitting our quadratic into 2 parts, and we're going to have 2 solutions. So we end up having 4 plus 2 radical 11 divided by 2, and we end up having 4 minus 2 radical 11 over 2. Now your final solution really depends on what the question is asking. So if they want approximate solutions, well then we need to plug this into a calculator to find an approximate solution. If they just want a simplified form with a radical, well we need to simplify this. Now remember, fractions, we can always break them up, so we would have 4 over 2 plus 2 radical 11 over 2. Well, 4 over 2 reduces just to 2, and 2 over 2 reduces just to 1, so we just get 2 plus radical 11 and 2 minus radical 11. So those would be our two solutions. So these are both what x is equal to. Or if it asks for approximate solutions, well then we need to plug this into a calculator to figure out what our approximate solutions would be, and we would get x is approximately, those squiggly equal signs mean approximately, 5.32 and negative 1.32. All right, now let's look at example 2. So we have x squared plus 4x minus 21. All right, so I'm going to list my a, b, and c again. So a is 1, b is positive 4, and c is negative 21. Right, so now let's fill in our quadratic formula. So we have the opposite of b first. So the opposite of positive 4 is going to be negative 4. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. My b squared is going to be 4 squared. Minus 4 times a, which my a is 1, times c, which my c is negative 21. And this is all over 2 times my a, which again is 1. Right, so we're going to simplify this a little bit inside the radical. So we have negative 4 plus or minus. Well, 4 squared is 16 minus 4 times 1 times negative 21, which is going to give me negative 84. And it's all over 2 times 1, which is just 2. So now we're going to take negative 4 plus or minus the square root. So I have 16 minus negative 84. Again, that becomes a superplus. So we add them together. 16 plus 84 is going to give me 100 all over 2. Well, this one's a little nicer because, well, 100 already is a perfect square. So we don't have to try to factor it down. We don't have to use the factorization in order to simplify my radical. So we have negative 4 plus or minus, well, the square root of 100 is just 10 all over 2. Well, now let's break that down into two different parts. So I have negative 4 plus 10 over 2, and we have negative 4 minus 10 over 2. Okay, remember this is all x is equal to, both of these solutions. So negative 4 plus 10 is going to give me 6 over 2. So one of my solutions is 3. And then negative 4 minus 10 is going to be negative 14 over 2, which is negative 7. So my solutions are x equals 3 and x equals negative 7. You can also just write x equals 3, comma negative 7. That's fine too. All right, number 3, we have x squared minus 2x equals 24. So we need to get our equation set equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 24 from both sides. So we're left with x squared minus 2x minus 24. I'm making sure it's still in standard form. 0. All right, so now we can put in our a, b, and c. So a is equal to 1. b is equal to -2, and c is equal to -24. So now put this into the quadratic formula. So the opposite of b, well, my b is -2, the opposite of b is +2. So we have +2 plus or minus the square root of my b squared, so -2 squared, minus 4 times my a, which is 1, c, -24, all over 2 times a. Okay, so now we're just going to simplify. So x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of, well, -2 squared is just 4, minus a -96, all over 2 times 1 is just 2. So let's finish simplifying under that radical. 2 plus or minus, well, 4 minus -6, we're going to add them, is going to give me 100 again, over 2. Well, we know the square root of 100 is just 10. And now we just have to break that down into our two parts of our solution. So we have 2 plus 10 over 2, and then we have x equals 2 minus 10 over 2. So 2 plus 10 is 12 over 2, so it equals 6. 2 minus 10 is -8 over 2, equals -4. So our solutions are x equals 6 and x equals -4. That's it.